Hi everybody and welcome back. Today's guest is Alan Chapman. Alan is a metabolic health coach and so much more. He has come on his own journey from mental health problems to helping others through nutrition and lifestyle practices, from ancestral health to quantum health. And he believes that we are all connected with the universe and other energies of living things. And hopefully we'll get round to talking about that. Alan writes blogs, he writes music, and he's a very positive and optimistic person. However, he's not always been like that. So welcome, Alan, and thank you for chatting with me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Deborah.
Good, good. And now I just want to, before we start talking, I just want to advise people that there are going to be some during the course of the conversation, difficult things that you're going to be talking about, your own suicide attempts and having lost your partner to suicide. So I just want to pre-warn people that those issues will be coming up during the course of this chat that we're going to be having. So with that being said, let's start now. So we know each other because we're both ambassadors for PHCUK. And so I know that food, real food and the right nutrition is really important for you. So just as a way of getting into this conversation, just let me know and let everybody know how that came to be, how you came to realise how important food is for physical and mental health.
I think I've always understood how real food is important because when I think back to when I was very young, a teenager, I would prefer to eat a traditional fried breakfast. All the stuff that we understand now to be very nutritious and good for us. So eggs and bacon and sausages, as were back then, which are probably a lot healthier than they are now in general. The vegetables that I was eating back then were things like bubble and squeak. And back in those days, they probably would have been cooked in lard. So I can remember going to transport cafes, and I actually used to write and had some published material in, I think it was the Independent, way back in.
Gosh.
This was a long time ago, because I'm 66 now. So I was growing up and doing all this in the 70s. So I think I always knew that, and I'd always been fit and healthy and done a lot of sport. And I think that was helping me to burn off whatever unnecessary carbs and processed foods that I was eating. So I can remember having tomato sauce and brown sauce and fish and chips and that sort of thing. So I think I always knew that. But what made the big difference and bring it all together was actually the New Year's Eve day before 2022, I think, so end of 2021. And I watched a video with my co-founder, partner, Maria Hennings-Hunt, which featured Andy Ramage and Christian Daly at the Zone 1 gym in Chelmsford. It's been moved since then. And that started to join the dots, and I realized, and then I just experimented, and I've always been an experimenter and always been very creative about how I approach everything. And so I then did the PHC training, and then I did the health results training, Steve Bennett, and then I paid for, because those trainings are free. And then I paid for the Nutrition Network training, which is Tim Noakes' work. And having been an endurance hill runner, I could relate very much to what Tim Noakes was saying. And then all this started to join up with what I'd been learning about suicide and mental health. And I choose to talk about mental health and well-being rather than mental illness or mental problems. I've always accentuated the positive, and this is part of my optimism, because I think that plants better seeds in my own consciousness and subconscious, as well as externally as well. And then I was able to do more experimenting with my own running. So I knew when I was doing endurance hill running, and I did some monsters. My usual run was the Bowline Walk run, which people come all over the country and some people internationally to run that in Leicestershire. And I'd been doing that for some years as training for marathons. And I did the London Marathon in, first the Leicester Marathon in 2016 and then the London Marathon in 2016 as well. The part of the dots that I was joining, I discovered the work of Professor Ed Bullmore. He's Cambridge neuroscientist in 2016, I think.
Can you spell his name for us, please?
That's, I think it's Bullmore.
Professor Ed Bullmore.
Bullmore,
sorry.
Yeah, Professor Edward or Ed Bullmore. He has quite a high profile, and he wrote a book, I think it was 2016, called The Inflamed Mind. I've got it somewhere, which I might find, but I don't want to keep jumping up and showing you books. And I can give you some of these references afterwards. You'll find him fairly easily if you just Google Professor Ed Bullmore and The Inflamed Mind. And this is an extraordinary book because it taught me that we're one system, brain and body, mind and body, and the inflammation goes from the body to the brain. So, but all the time I was reading this, I wasn't quite joining the dots because I was still doing endurance hill running. So I did 2 Beachy Head marathons in 2016 and 2017. And they are monsters. So that entails training to run for me over 5 hours. And you have to get into what is called, or what I call and other people do, fat burn by then. And I could feel when I was training that I would go through this wall of an hour and a half or 2 hours where my body had switched from burning what it is, the glycogen or the whatever that store is from the carbs. And then after an hour and a half or 2 hours, you go through the wall of the pain and then you're into fat burn. So I knew I was into fat burn and I'd had long experience of doing this, but I didn't really understand it fully until I started doing the PHC training and the Nutrition Network training, and then understanding more about Tim Noakes' work and reading about Nina Teicholz's Big Fat Surprise. And all the time I was working with Maria Hennings-Hunt on this. Maria and I go back a very, very long way. I first saw her in 1978. And there's more I could add about that, but I won't at this stage because this is my story and I can't talk for Maria. She talks very well for herself, and she's a PHC ambassador as well down in Kent. So I was able to experiment with my body, and I stopped endurance hill running when I learned how harmful this was for me, when I realized how harmful this inflammation was. So I was running as a way of what I believe to be distracting myself and curing myself and treating myself from these suicidal feelings. And I was unrelentingly suicidally ideated from 2015 until about 2021. And I can very easily switch and go back there because
Right.
nothing scares me. So I can reframe that now, and I can go back and I think, okay, I don't care if I wake in the morning. I have that kind of fearlessness. That's another story, but it's very much related to the kind of energies that I draw on and the kind of fearlessness that I have. So I started to do some experiments in March. Bear in mind, I'd had years of experience of doing sport, and quite intense sport. I didn't start playing rugby till I was 37. And I played a really good standard of rugby. For my age, at 37, you're playing against, young people that are in their 20s and built much more strongly, much more powerfully. But I was holding my own back then at a very good county standard, playing with county standards and pretty much ex-professionals. They were of that standard. So I'm blessed with good genes, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I had always eaten well and exercised well and tried to look after my body and my mind. And I was lucky that I disintegrated at the time that I did. I think it started about 2007 with the breakdown of my marriage, and then 2015 when Leanne killed herself. And then I'm just going to show you Leanne. I think you can see that. So this is the front cover of an album that Leanne and I made, and she killed herself just before we finished the album, and then I had to finish the album.
Gosh,
so this is
that must
high
have been
dosage.
very hard.
Well, it's high dosage grief processing, because what I didn't understand at the time is you can process grief. It's how we grow. But anyway, getting back to the nutrition. So I went out and I ran, and I wasn't full carnivore then. I was very much on a keto diet. And I went out and I ran basically 4 half marathons in a row, which I'd never done before, in the hot weather of March 2022. I got back each time. I wasn't tired. I wasn't hungry. I didn't begin to hit a wall. And the 5th day, I thought I'll go out and see how far I can run, see if I hit the wall, because I did the bowline run. I knew very well, I know this run like the back of my hand. And I know when I would normally have hit the wall after an hour and a half, or start getting those feelings where you're knowing, you're going into fat burn, and I didn't. And I kept running and running. And then I got back to my local park, which has got some very, very steep hills in. This is Bradgate Park in Leicestershire, part of the Bowline Run. I just carried on running and running and running. And it got to dusk. And I thought, I need to go home because I've got some things to do. And I don't really like running in dusk because you can trip over. So I went home, and excuse me, sorry, it was coming to dusk, and I don't like running in the dusk, especially on rocks and where there's roots and things like that. You can trip over, and it was getting late. I had to go back home and get on with my day. And I went back home, and I'd been running for well over 4 hours, and I wasn't tired. I'm not the least bit tired, and I wasn't hungry. It was absolutely extraordinary. I'd never done that in my life before on carbs, and that was evidence to me. And then the next experiment that I did in August 2022 were the 2 hottest days, and many people, it might even have been most people, were not even venturing outside because they've been so frightened by the weather forecast. And I've always sought to go running in the heat. I love the heat. But I waited until the heat of the day on both of those. They were the hottest days of the year. I think they broke the record somewhere down in Heathrow. And I went out both days, and I ran for 90 minutes both days
Wow.
in the heat
The heat.
of the day. I didn't run the hills. There were some hills involved, but I ran in the countryside, 90 minutes each day. It was tough. I'm not going to pretend. It was tough. The last 15, 20 minutes, really, really brutal, but not in the way that you're tired or you've hit a wall or anything like that. It was purely the heat, because I didn't take any water. I very rarely run with water. I got back home and I came in the front door and I just kind of collapsed into child position on the floor. I couldn't move for ages. And then I had to sit in a cold bath for about half an hour to cool down. It was heat, but I wasn't tired and I wasn't hungry. It was just pure heat exhaustion. And that proved to me again how powerful this, and I wasn't full carnivore then. I was just very, very keto, very, very keto. And since then, I've done a bit of what I call, other people call jeffing or intervals or fartlek. And I do that and I can still run extremely quickly, very, very strongly. I'm 66. I can run very, very fast. And I do that short bursts, but mostly I'm a walker now, and I walk for hours and hours and hours. I walk all day long. And I've done more recent experiments. About 4 weeks ago, I did a 3.5 day food fast where I just drank water for 3.5 days. And I've got no real spare fat on me. I would if there weren't younger people watching, just show you what I look like. I'm 65 and there's hardly any fat on me. And I did 3.5 days. The reason I mention that is I think I probably haven't got a lot of fat spare. I think it might, in a way, ironically, be easier for people to have a bit more fat on them to do a 3.5 day fast. And so it was another experiment. And the first 2 days were easy. I took it day by day. Third day was tough because it was pouring with rain all day. So I chose not to go out for a walk. I just don't like getting wet and the cold and the damp. So I just stayed indoors and I did gym work and yoga and calisthenics indoors and somehow got through the day. And then once you get to nighttime, I slept really, really well. And then I ate the next day. So that's a long answer to the question, and I hope that's helpful for you or anybody else.
Definitely. I mean, I can see that you really found that exercising, the extreme exercising that you were doing, you came to realize that was so much better when you were eating a high fat diet, a keto way of living, and that very much ties in with, as you rightly say, what Tim Noakes talks about, because I mean he's found through his own experiments, in fact, how dangerous a high carbohydrate diet can be for the human body.
Yes.
So, and how have you noticed mentally? How have you noticed that following a high fat or now a carnivore way of eating has helped you mentally?
I feel empowered now. It's terrifically empowering when you understand how we're connected to everything. So metabolic health, I think, by its nature and definition, and holistic health as well, I think by their definitions, they are connected. It's not just a body and brain connection. It's a spiritual connection. So it's a connection with the energies and the cosmos, cosmology, which I've been interested in for a very long while. And when we understand more about these things, that we are just this tiny speck inside whatever is, and part of, as I believe, this flow of higher intelligence, or a universal brain, whatever we want to call it, and these bigger energies. When we understand more and more about this, then we become more empowered and more fearless, because we feel more in control of what is going on inside our head. And I'm very interested in the consciousness and the subconscious as well.
And do you feel like you wouldn't have come to that way of thinking without changing what you were eating, without finding your
Yeah,
way to keto and carnivore? So that's
yeah,
really been the route for
yeah,
you to realize how there is a connection between brain and body, and why on earth wouldn't there be?
yeah,
You know, I mean, Dr. Georgia Ede talks
yeah,
about the same thing. Brain is connected to the body, so why on earth wouldn't we know, wouldn't we
yeah,
realize that whatever
yeah,
we're eating is going to have an effect on the brain as much as it has, you know, an effects on the body? I
yeah,
mean, it's
absolutely
kind of,
right.
but it's not until we sort of say it that you think, oh yeah, that's actually
Yeah,
it does make sense. I mean, it really does make sense. But I feel like you've taken that slightly wider, in as much as you're connecting, you know, who we are with something greater than that, with you know, what's happening in the universe, and the whole power of the universe. So can you talk a little bit about that, and say how you came to realize that?
uh, I I think I've always been um, intuitively connected with that. So when I was very young, I was always better at art than numbers. I love numbers, but I'm not great with numbers. I'm an artist, a creative, a sensitive. So I was drawn to music, and the use of my body. I was very, very good at football. I was very, very good at sport, and um, these things that are um, part. An advocate and a believer in Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. It's beautiful, and when I discovered that, that explained a lot. That there are lots of different sorts of intelligences. It's not just the
Mm.
IQ. There is emotional intelligence, and there is all kinds of other intelligences that aren't normally measured. And just gradually, as I got older, I was able to join all this together. I think I've always understood this in my soul or being, and it's breaking free of the brainwashing, and breaking free of the stuckness. So we keep growing, and
Mm.
when we stop growing, we're stuck, and that's basically when we start to die in our alive human form, if I can put it that way. I just have, where there's a difference between our alive human form and our subconscious and whatever the soul is. So I understood that, and I was blessed with some absolutely profound mentors when I was younger, and I look back on them. So one of my mentors back then was Owen Frampton, who's the father of Peter Frampton, that many young people don't know about. But Peter Frampton,
Absolutely.
incredible guy, and Owen Frampton was my art master, my art teacher, and he was a mentor. He also taught David Bowie, or Davy Jones as he
Yeah.
was, because he went to my school, and all these things
Mm.
are connected. It's kind of crazy. It's mad. And I'm able to look back on that and make more sense of it now, because I've grown so much myself. And this is part of the growth, and the letting go of who we thought we were, and
Mm.
who and what we thought we wanted to become. So I'm
Okay,
very
so
much,
can you just talk a little bit about that? So what exactly do
yeah.
you mean by letting go of who we are?
Okay, well, so at any one time, we have this view of ourselves, and that determines pretty much how we see everything else, in my view and in my experience. So we see the world how we are, not how the world is.
Right.
And I'm not the first to say that. You'll find there are lots of different quotes and maxims based on that. And so, as we change, the world changes, and the world changes around us. Everything changes because we see it differently, and that includes our past view of ourselves. So that's not difficult to demonstrate. It's very easy to demonstrate. So what was important to us as a teenager is very different to what is important to us as a parent with children. And then that changes completely again when we're a grandparent. And then as we lose people, they die in various ways, and we go through griefs. We grow, and we're constantly becoming stronger spiritually because we become less afraid of dying. And then we get to the stage, unless we're in the grip of big pharmaceutical companies and drugged up to the eyeballs, which sadly so many people become. If we manage to stay free of these outside distortions about the way that our brain works, and if we manage to keep hold of our consciousness, which determines our subconsciousness and our control of our soul and what we really feel about everything, and it's more to do with feeling than thought. It's an intuitive thing. We're all born to die. We're hardwired. We're born to die. It's in us. If we go back to ancient peoples, they would not have been so afraid of dying as we are, especially when they get to that stage of life when their death was approaching. It's okay. It's part of life. They see it all around them. So that's how it would have been. But these days, there are many people who die and they've never seen a dead body, never mind kissed one. It would frighten them to death, almost literally. So because of what I've been through, I have grown, and I've let go that person in me that was younger, and part of it was my experience with Leanne, and that's one of the biggest experiences you can have with your own kind of existential self. Who am I? What am I? Am I afraid of dying? And all this.
So Leanne was your partner who sadly killed herself.
Yeah, she was my partner from 2010 to 2015, and she still teaches me things now because of what she went through. So for whatever reason, she made the choice to end her life, and that's her choice. And I thank her for that. It's a gift. And there'll be many people who say, well, how can the suicide of your partner, even though I was with Leanne for 5 years, rather than 15 or 20 or 35 or 50, it's not a competition, but it was deep and profound. And people would say, well, how can that be a gift if your partner takes the life in the way that they did? And I say, well, why would she want me to think about it any differently? Why would she want me to live my life in self-destructive misery or depression? She would want me to reframe it as a gift. And anybody who dies would want the people that are left in grief to recover as soon as possible, to celebrate their life. To celebrate the life of the person who's died in whatever way they've died.
So you're not saying you celebrate her death, you're saying you celebrate her life. Just to clarify.
I don't celebrate anybody who takes their life, especially somebody who leaves such grief behind and who goes so wastefully before their time. So Leanne was only 51 or 52. I can't remember exactly. But she she had so many years, good years ahead of her. The other point about Leanne, bless her, was that she was vegetarian. So
Right.
and this is part of what I have to let go and forgive myself for, which I do. It's a lot of this is self-forgiveness for who I thought I was, and stop beating yourself up, because suicide grief is full of all these infinitely dimensioned feelings, and grief is as well. Grief is formed of lots of different things. So there's anger, and there's bitterness, and there's self-loathing, there's regret, and all these negative feelings, and we have to work our way through those. And I wasn't gentle and kind to myself as I was advised by much wiser people to be. This became the start of many years of self-destruction, and it produced trauma upon trauma. So just to go back to the point, I celebrate Leanne's life, and I celebrate her courage. And I don't glorify suicide, because we must be careful about this. Otherwise, we can make it sound like it's some kind of noble thing to do. There's a very interesting book actually on that point, because modern society, and we all live according to our conditioning in the society that we've been born and raised. But the seminal work, I believe, still on suicide is a book called The Savage God by Al Alvarez. The Savage God by Al Alvarez. And Al Alvarez knew Sylvia Plath very well.
Yes. Okay.
And he writes about suicide extraordinarily brilliantly. He was a brilliant writer amongst much else. And for anyone who wants to understand suicide, then read The Savage God. I read that book when I was profoundly suicidal. And that's high dosage grieving. It's just opening the floodgates and let it go through. I don't recommend it to anybody, but it empowers me now looking back on all that, because it's just, okay, open the floodgates and let all this stuff wash through me. And again, before I learned that you can dose grief. You don't have to suffer the layers of trauma that I did and that people do. You know, there are people that go through much bigger traumas than me. That's part of my philosophy. You look around and you think, my God, I'm so lucky. You know, I could still go out if I had to. I could still go out and run a hill marathon if I wanted to. I train for it. I don't want to do it, though. I choose not to. But I can still run. I've got my fitness and my health, and I chat to people. I chatted to somebody the other day. There's a little guy in a mobility scooter, and he could hardly use his hands to talk. And he is a tiny little shriveled man, terrifically unwell by most people's standards. And I spoke with him, and my God, what an inspiration, because he said, you get difficult days, but you just have to realize there's always somebody worse off than you. And this guy, he couldn't walk, he could hardly move his hands, and he was in shockingly bad health by most people's standards. I just think, you know, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky.
Of course.
So I'm grateful. I'm grateful beyond words.
And I think you're really touching on something there that I think a lot of people are now beginning to realise, is that the more we can be grateful for what we have, the better life seems, actually. And gratitude is something that we can practice every single day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely right. And with that comes abundance. Yes. I've written recently the beginnings of Stuart's story, a homeless man that I met a few weeks ago. And increasingly more people are helping him. and he's been homeless since 2008. And when I found him, he helped me, which is, I told the story on my Substack. If anyone's interested, they can go have a look at that and listen to it. And in return for the help that he gave me, and we were destined to meet, I'm in no doubt whatsoever about this, but all he wanted in return was some water. And when I pressed him and said, "Can I get you anything else?" he said, "A pair of socks." So it's abundance, and I have these feelings. My empowered self might lead people to believe that I have quite a lot. I live in a very unusual situation, and part of the abundance for me is things like napkins that I use as hankies. That's abundance to me. You know, follow the work of Ken Berry, Dr. Ken Berry,
Absolutely.
about carnivore diet. And, you know, we're, as I understand it, we're much more similar to dogs. And half the world pretty much squats to poo. And I spent a very, very long time in the washroom industry. And I in my previous life, one of my previous lives, I went to meet Alexander Kira, who wrote the definitive book about human motions, weeing and pooing. It's called The Bathroom. I had a copy of it then. I got him to sign it and brought it back with me. Sadly, I didn't manage to hang on to it. But Alexander Kira was an extraordinary man. And we're not designed to sit down and poo like we do. We're designed to squat. And if people are listening to this and never done it, try it. It's a wonderful experience. So, yeah.
So just talk a little bit more about the connection between abundance and gratitude. How are they connected?
Well, the less you have, then the more you appreciate things.
Right.
And the other way of putting that is the more you have, then the more you want. And it's another dopamine hit, isn't it? Going out and doing some shopping. So shopping is another addiction. And as Bitten Johnson explained so well, Bitten Johnson, she's one of the pioneers of the food addiction movement.
Absolutely amazing.
Yes. Absolutely amazing woman. And as she explains, and others do, is that sugar is the gateway drug to all other addictions, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, whether it's hoarding, whether it's the addiction to who we thought we were. That's an addiction.
Yes.
We can't let it go. We can't go through it. We get stuck. We can't let go of who we were. And so coming back to the question, what's the relationship between gratitude and abundance, is that the less we have, the more grateful we are for small things. So I'm fantastically grateful for the fact that the worst addiction I have is drinking black tea with milk. I buy raw milk or unhomogenized milk, and that I can feel it. You know, it's a black tea, it's caffeine. I try not to have too much of it, but I think, okay, well, I don't care now. If I wake in the small hours because I've had too much caffeine or because I've got too much stress going on, because of what I do and what's going on in my life, I have things going on that would be incredibly stressful for most people. And I can just think, well, I'm not dead. I've got my fitness and my health. I'm going to refer you to another extraordinary book now for anyone that wants to understand this stuff. So this book, most people, many people will have heard of Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
not many people know about this book. So this book, I'm going to read from the back cover, and it says, well, I'll hold it up there. Let me see if I can read while it's there. Oh, it's back to front. Never mind.
Why don't you read it to us? Read it
I'm
to
going to
us.
read it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read it to you. So, it's introduced by Daniel Goleman, incidentally, which people will know what Daniel Goleman is. He the emotional intelligence guy.
Yes.
Yeah, Daniel Goleman. So he says, we give life meaning through our actions, but also through loving, and finally through suffering. I don't advocate going out and looking for suffering on purpose. We've got to be kind to ourselves, love ourselves. Just months after his liberation from Auschwitz, renowned psychiatrist Viktor Frankl delivered this remarkable series of talks. Publishing in English for the very first time, they reveal his central thoughts on meaning, resilience, and his conviction that every crisis contains an opportunity.
Wow.
Despite the unspeakable horrors in the camp, Frankl learned from his fellow inmates that it is always possible to say yes to life. And this book was published. That's Frankl. There's energy in all of this. In spite of it, say yes to life in spite of everything. And there you can see how recent this book is, 2019.
Right.
2019. So Frankl died a long time ago. It's taken until 2019 for this work to come out.
For that to be published. Wow.
And you think we know anything. We don't know anything, you know. Well, we know some things, but yeah. And this is without getting onto, which I'll just throw in now because this is mind-blowing and it helps answer the question about the links between these things and what is energy and what is life and what is death and what is a soul or what is anything. So that book is extraordinary, and I'm going to read from the back cover. Here is the story of scientific research into plasma, the fourth state of matter. Robert Temple reveals extraordinary discoveries that up till now have been unknown by anyone outside specialist circles, despite the fact that many of the pioneers in this field have been Nobel laureates. The implications of these discoveries for our place in the universe, for the likelihood of other life forms of intelligence out there, and for our understanding of human nature are extraordinary. The universe is more than 99% plasma. Observations by astronomers and by scientists in the lab reveal the lifelike behavior of entities made of plasma. Some of these entities exhibit a complexity and features similar to those in advanced computers, which suggest they may be capable of high levels of intelligence. Two gigantic clouds of plasma, which together are 9 times larger than the Earth, have been detected hovering between the Earth and the Moon.
Oh, goodness.
So this is kind of up to date, and it joins a lot else to me, for me, together about energy. That we're part of an energy system that goes way, way beyond what we've been taught to understand about what is energy, what is life, what is death, and what is a soul. So
And I
anyone
think
that,
we're just beginning now. I mean, the last few years, the study of quantum biology has
yeah,
become
oh yeah,
very interesting and
yeah,
is starting to really take off, I think. And I think that's all about energy, isn't it? And that's all about how
absolutely,
we, on a cellular level,
yes,
take the energy from the sun or the um, energy from animals that we eat that have then eaten things that where the sun has been on them, like plants,
yeah,
for instance,
yeah,
and how our bodies use that energy.
yes,
And it's really beginning to make a change, or it's beginning to make us question the way the human body works.
yeah.
Um,
And the more you dig into all of these different aspects, the more you realise that the the hidden information, and information is a crucial word, which I'll come back to in a minute. The hidden information is the most profound and the most
yes.
meaningful.
Mm,
And that which we are bombarded with every
mm,
day, and
mm,
many people take as being reality, isn't.
mm,
Reality is
yes.
something different.
Mm, mm,
And so, and Robert Temple refers to a lot of what you're alluding to. And I want to just talk about information theory as
mm,
well, because
mm,
this is a very interesting aspect, and people could very easily research this and look at the work of Jacques Vallée, the French spelling. You'll Google him, find him very, very easily. He was the scientific advisor to Spielberg for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And
right.
you'll find a TED talk, probably about 10 years old now, of Jacques Vallée talking about information theory.
Mm,
And Temple talks about information theory, that this is different to scientific theory. And there's
mm,
been hardly any research into information theory. And I'll leave you to do your own
yeah,
follow
yeah,
up. Anybody that wants to
yeah,
do that.
yeah. Mm. And I mean, I wonder if just going back to what we were talking about before about food addiction, shopping
Yeah,
addictions,
yeah,
and hoarding and all that sort of thing,
yeah,
and these are all problems with the modern world, really, aren't
yeah,
they? They're how
yeah,
we relate to the modern world, and
yeah,
how, in fact, it's very difficult for us as beings to relate to the modern world because there's so much of it,
yeah,
so much of what is going on in the modern world that
yeah,
is just so wrong for us on a
yeah.
cellular level.
Yes, absolutely right. Something that I'm experimenting with lately, and I've discovered this through Roger Meacock. And as and when I've discovered these things, I generally add them to livewildlivefree.org, the resources page.
Which is your website.
Right, so I co-founded that with Maria in 2021,
Mm,
and
mm,
we didn't know exactly why we were doing it. We just intuited that we wanted to start this, and I add to it a lot. Maria does her own extraordinarily profound work with her website, and other works. You'll find her through dancegeneration.co.uk.
mm, mm.
And Maria's brilliant, and she knows about women's health because she's a woman. I know nothing about women's health because I'm a man. But going back to Roger Meacock and his work on the livewildlivefree.org is something very recently that I've begun experimenting with. So here's a very interesting thing.
What's that?
Look at that. That is a Harmony XL. And this is some of the equipment that I'm experimenting with to very good effect, I believe. It's working.
So what,
And if
sorry,
you
just
go
talk
to,
us through what is a Harmony XL?
I'm going to get the leaflet and read from it. So this is to do with 5G and radiation, electrosmog, and what people refer to as EMF.
Yeah.
and I work with other people on this. I mean, world leading people on this. I'm a butterfly. I connect with lots of different things and lots of different people. I'm a fan of the first law of cybernetics, which my understanding is, and I discovered this quite a long time ago. The unit within the system that has the most responses available. Let me start again slowly. The unit within the system that has the most behavioral responses available to it controls the system. I don't like the word controls there, but what it means is if you can adapt to all the different stimuli coming into you in whatever system it is, then essentially you are the most effective point in that system. That's known, I'm paraphrasing, but that's known as the first law of cybernetics. I'm very interested in cybernetics and the merging of cybernetics with love. That's another story, which is what's happening with third order or fourth order, whatever it is, cybernetics. So this unit, it says, so this is a Harmony XL, what I'm holding up. And it says scope of the system. That's it. I'm reading from this card. And it says MF05, which is the name of that Harmony XL unit, compensates for the potential effects of Wi-Fi, WiMAX, Bluetooth, DECT wired telephones, relay antennas, satellite communications, electrical networks from low to very high voltage, geobiological disturbances, microwave ovens, low consumption light bulbs, smart meters, CPL, that's carrying currents online, transport, car, plane, and train. We're experimenting all the time with this, and I experiment. So I bought one of those, and I also recently had delivered, I think it was yesterday or the day before, one of these. So I wear this on a string that I made myself because I thought I don't want to risk it in my pocket. So I wear this when I'm going out, and I've worn it for this. And that does the same, but in a more direct way.
And what do they do? Do they block? Do they block these energies?
As I understand it, what they do is convert those energies. They use that electrical. Essentially, they use, the way I understand it, and I'm paraphrasing, and Roger Meacock can explain it a lot better than I can. They convert the electrical energy into magnetic resonance.
Right. Because why it's something that is magnetic is better for us?
Yes. Electrical energy is not healthy for us.
Right.
Is my view. I think that we can probably transcend that in other ways because the power of the brain is so powerful. What I understand about how often the cells of the body regenerate. And I'm very interested in placebo versus nocebo. So the power of the brain, and Joe Dispenza's work, a lot of people will have heard of Joe Dispenza. Yeah. His work is extraordinary as well.
Yes, it is, I agree.
So the healing power of the brain, but I prefer to work on all fronts and have everything going for me. It's not that I want to live forever. I don't. I look forward to when I can, experience the transition. I don't want to be drugged up to the eyeballs when I die. I look forward to experiencing that euphoria when I transition and the soul becomes whatever it is next. So again, not many people will have come across this. And this is Kazimierz Dabrowski. And this is personality growth through positive disintegration. And that's what I've been through. Right. And when you go through it, you come out of the other side and you're reborn and you're fearless. So people can do it in different ways. Right, it basically means you're not scared of anything.
Mm. Mm.
And the other interesting thing about Dabrowski, not many people know about him because his work was in Polish. It's only fairly recently been translated. And this is a translation published by Maurice Bassett.
Okay.
And Maurice Bassett, I've worked with for some while, 15 or 20 years.
Gosh.
I worked with him on Abraham Maslow's work. So this is another example of work that is published way after, so posthumously, way after the person died. And these are talks that Abraham Maslow gave. So some people will know of the hierarchy of needs.
The hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
yes.
So this is Maurice Bassett published this.
Oh, yes. Right.
And for a long while, I was collaborating with, and I still do, with Maurice Bassett. And Maurice Bassett publishes Bill Tillier's work. Right. So Bill Tillier and the Chasm, the Positive Disintegration book, but also another book, a bigger book than that, called Personality Development and Positive Disintegration, or Personality Development through Positive Disintegration.
Okay.
Written by William Bill Tillier, and I've substacked about that.
Okay.
About realities, because William Tillier presented at the 1996, get that, 1996 conference, a paper on realities, and the PDF of that paper is available on the Substack. I embedded it into the Substack,
okay.
and I explain a lot else about that.
And so what does he talk about to do with realities? What's the main point that he's making?
Well, they're not what we think they are. So whether we take the view that we make our own realities, as I believe that we do, or that something else is making our own realities, and we connect with that and we engage with all of that on different levels as we grow and we become more open to all of this stuff and connected. When the more open we are to these energies, the more they happen. So for a long while, I've been manifesting. Yes. Producing things and people. You think of people and there they are. It's not coincidence. We've been conditioned to believe that a lot of this stuff is coincidence.
Yes, yes.
Most of it isn't.
Right.
So I've been manifesting without really understanding how I do it.
And so for people who don't know, who've never heard of manifesting, would you just talk us through what manifesting is?
I'll give you some examples. And a lot of this started to happen after Leanne died, and I reconnected with Maria because Maria and I were together. 1978 is when I fell in love with her. We were together as a romantic couple when we were both living at our parents' houses. She was I think she was 17 and I was 19, going on 20. And we were together for about 18 months. And Maria is my absolute hero. She is a superhero of mine. And when you explore her work, my God, it really truly is transcendent. So immediately after Leanne killed herself, and I used to discuss Maria with Leanne, as Leanne used to discuss her past lovers with me. And immediately after Leanne died, I had to find Maria. I had had no contact with Maria for 35 years. I didn't know whether she was alive or dead. That in itself could be a small book about how I came to find Maria. But I manifested her and Maria manifested me. That's what I believed happened. Now, whether we are in different universes, as I think is possible, I don't know. I don't understand, but I don't need to understand it. I just go with it.
Mm.
And Maria and I then became romantic from 2015 until about May this year. There's another story to that, but I'm still connected with Maria and we still work together and we message all the time and we cooperate, and not all the time, but often we message pretty much every day. and we chat sometimes. So I believe that Maria and I manifested each other. It cannot be explained any other way. And then some other things happened when I moved temporarily down in 2016 when my father was dying. My dad was dying of Alzheimer's. And I and my two brothers cared for my dad as he was dying. And that's profound. And so I was with him. I was lucky enough to be with him and he didn't have any medication when he was dying. He was brought home because we knew he was dying and we wanted to get him home, and it was an effort to get him home, and it took him 8 days to die. It was profound. I mean, my God, 8 days to die. He'd hardly drunk or eaten anything for well over a month. He was skin and bone. And it was like every day, oh God, Dad, please die. And the Sunday before he died, there was a big family gathering. I think he died on the Tuesday. I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was a family gathering, and it was a lovely sunny day. And he was literally on his deathbed where he'd been for 8 days. He couldn't move. He was in kind of fetal position. We were just trying to make him comfortable, and you're dealing with a big baby by then.
Yeah.
Only not so much kind of, it's just skin and bones and disintegrating from the inside outwards. So it's really interesting.
Sad. Yeah.
Well, it is, but it's absolutely beautiful is how I could reframe it, because I went in on a number of occasions when people were, and there were kids playing outside, laughing and joking in the garden, people having a lovely time as a big family, his family. And I went back inside a few times. I said, "You okay, Dad?" And he just went, "Yeah, It's all he could muster. But I knew he loved it. I mean, what a way. What a way to go. What a way to go when you can hear your children and your grandchildren laughing and playing in your own back garden in the sunshine. What a way to go. And he was not medicated except by love. And you can see I'm still processing this because my dad died about a year after Leanne killed herself. So I couldn't. And what they say, and I agree with this, is that big griefs, especially suicide, the first year you're numb. And if they told you what was going to happen in the second and third year, well, I don't know. You survive because you've got to, but then some people don't. Because going back to Leanne, she was a vegetarian. She was exercising. She was trying to get fit, but she couldn't. And if I'd have known what I knew back then, I could have saved her without a doubt.
So do you think that her diet had something to do?
Oh, without a doubt. Absolutely.
Her mental health.
Absolutely. She was one of these people who was not, because very, very few people are carb tolerant. Ironically, I think I'm reasonably carb tolerant. If I wanted a bowl of oats now, I could have a bowl of oats. It probably wouldn't spike me. I used to eat groats as well, which not many people realise are oats before they're rolled. And there's some mysterious thing about the tax on oat milling machines in this country that happened. It's all... But anyway, groats, they're great things because there's unprocessed grains.
I think groats are what they ate hundreds of years ago, weren't they?
Yeah, that's it. And they're more popular in Europe, groats. So, but of course, increasingly, it has been more difficult to get hold of this less refined stuff and or cereal, but I just choose not to now. I'd rather have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
So,
So
sorry, I just want to finish about Leanne.
Yeah, sorry.
The other thing with Leanne was she was being medicated for grief.
Oh.
So Leanne had lost her daughter, Ella, about 18 months before I met her,
Right.
age 11, to bone cancer.
Goodness.
And Ella had died very, very quickly of a very, very serious, fast-acting bone cancer. Leanne blamed herself for it, for not noticing it. Leanne was from a Catholic family. She was one of 6. Her father was a Red Devils at Arnhem, prisoner of war, who came back to this country eventually and then became a millionaire, founded a huge business. Didn't love the kids. He would come back from work and the kids would amuse themselves, 6 of them, in a separate anteroom in a huge house in a very posh part of Leicester. Everybody's doing the best. The father was from a different generation and he was traumatized in his own way by what had happened in the PO war camp.
Yeah.
He used to go on retreats every year. Leanne used to tell me, to a local abbey here, and I'd do whatever he did to process whatever he was dealing with. But he didn't love the kids. He made sure that they had the material things that they wanted and needed. But Leanne, the middle one, grew up as a child of nature, and she brought back dogs and stray dogs and all this. She was deeply sensitive, fantastic singer, songwriter, didn't know how beautiful she was. And this is it with all of us. We have no idea how beautiful we are. We're all beautiful, but we are brainwashed by the big system to believe that we are less than perfect. And so we use stuff that is provided to us and marketed to us very cleverly in the belief that it's going to make us better. But it just keeps fueling this insatiable
Are you
desire for
talking
dopamine.
about big pharma, big food here?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, big pharma, big food, big tech. And underneath that hierarchy, if you want. So there's a hierarchy of monetary wealth. And then you have the systemic enablers or administrators. So I remember the days when businesses were run by real entrepreneurs. And then sometime, I think in the 1980s, maybe it started a bit earlier than that. But to my mind, the bit, as I call it, and I mean no offense to anybody, everybody's doing their best, but the bean counters took over because it became the fact that you could do more with the stroke of an accountant's pen than you could by any amount of entrepreneurial selling, marketing, creative ability, never mind love. So the notion that you could use love in business, which I actually wrote about a lot years and years ago, many years ago, I mean, more than 20 years ago, that has now become kind of almost laughable among, the people that run businesses these days. So it's big tech, big pharma, big food. At the top, I'm not going to say what I really think about this. It's for a discussion for another day. But what I will do is say that, like all the great human destructions on a big scale, because we've had human destructions on a big scale for hundreds and hundreds of years and probably thousands of years, it's partly willful and it's partly systemic. So the destruction of the Native American Indian people, and there's some of their people who, to my understanding, didn't need to count. They didn't need numbers. They didn't need business. If you wanted to borrow a horse. You didn't rent it. And if the horse died, well, okay, fair enough. Horses die. Let's just go and get another one, but just one. And it's like, okay, we need a buffalo. Let's go and get one. We only need one. And then the white man came over, and the same story happened in South Africa with the destruction of the American, the South African buffalo. And in North America, it was the destruction of the Native American way of life. So I think a lovely story, whether it's true or not, I don't mind, I don't care, but it's a lovely story, is that Native American Indian would count 1, 2, 3 and many, because they didn't need to count anymore. 1, 2, 3. And the biggest, it's not the biggest, maybe it is, there is a huge diabetes crisis among the Native American Indian. And this is taught by Nutrition Network and other people that know about these things. Yeah. So this is because 200 years ago, Native American Indians were only eating buffalo nose to tail. And now they've only had 200 years to adapt to the Western diet.
Yes.
So the size of houses.
And I think that's happening all over the world, isn't it? The modern diet seems to be whichever country it moves into, therein follows metabolic poor health.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. So, yes, you've said it, and these things can be distilled into, just almost a 50 or 100-word paragraph. Once you understand how the dots join up, and then once you join up the dots, you don't really need to know anymore. And when you combine that with the fearlessness as well, and think, well, okay, I'm really not bothered about dying, because nobody knows what happens when you die. Although I have met at least one person who tells a very, very compelling story about having died and coming back to life again. Not the only one. There are some incredible autobiographies that talk about people who have died. Either it's known as a near-death experience, or it's something that can be seen as this person that heaven isn't, or whatever heaven isn't ready for this person yet. And I believe I went through that rebirth, where it's a rebirth of the soul, and then we come out and we're a different person. That's it. And so this is the power that comes. It's the power that comes from fearlessness, and what Frankl talks about and what Maslow talks about with transcendence. Also what Temple talks about with plasma and the fearlessness. But also we are bringing that about in a practical reality way by saying, well, you can be like this if we just connect with how we used to live and be more like the Native American Indian. Yeah. Or connect with our ancestral DNA. What is our ideal diet, and how do we mitigate the effects of 5G?
Absolutely.
How do we do this stuff? And whether it's actually working or not, maybe doesn't matter. What matters is that we're empowered. We believe that we are now taking responsibility for ourselves and our health.
So I certainly do think that for most people, for a lot of people in the modern world, they have lost that connection between themselves and simply life outside of their front door, because so much of the food that is eaten is ultra processed food, which contains no nutrition or very little nutrition. And so people are obviously eating more because their body is starving. I mean, there's never been, I can't think of a time, when there's been so much to eat and yet people are starving.
Exactly.
So I think from that point of view, we've very much lost that link between where our food comes from, or where real food comes from, and nourishing ourselves. And I think you're also bringing into that the nourishment on a spiritual level as well, aren't you? Really?
Yes. Absolutely, because it's all part of the whole. So we extend the body, mind, the physical, emotional. So the physical, emotional with the spiritual, and the spiritual by unavoidable implication, that is life, universe, and everything. Whatever it is. And so we're part of the whole, and then we start to address that, and then we
Yes.
gradually engage with this idea of fearlessness, and gradually change our diet. So we don't need to do it like a baptism of fire, and and hurt ourselves like,
No,
like I
no.
did. We can do it gradually.
And so just talk us through how you've gone from keto to carnivore. How have you done that? Was that just a gradual thing that you did?
Yeah, by experimenting, and I loved
Yes.
it. So I love
Yeah.
the taste of eggs. I'm lucky enough to live near somebody who delivers me. I'm cutting down a bit now because I did get up to between 8 and 11 dozen eggs a week.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how many would you eat in a day?
Well, that's anything between 9 and a couple of dozen in a
Right.
day.
Right.
And I would generally fry them 9 at a time.
Okay.
And
Wow.
sometimes do different things with the whites and the yolks. Sometimes eat them raw. Sometimes peel out the collagen.
Okay.
Once, to show somebody, I wouldn't make a habit of this. I think it's too much calcium. To demonstrate, I just put a small egg in my mouth, shell and all, crunched it up and ate it, swallowed it all. Now, it's a bit of a show off, but it does prove a point. It's very interesting.
Yes.
So I'm cutting down because I believe that I think the body likes change. So I'm now having more avocados than I was. I did go through a period of not having milk at all, but I think it's more in my ancestry. I'm more than a third Jewish, Polish, Ukrainian, German, Jewish diaspora before Israel was formed, all of this stuff way back. So that's Fertile Crescent, Eastern Mediterranean, where dairy farming first evolved, as I understand it. So I believe that and I'm very dark skinned. I can have any amount of sun. I don't burn. I heal very quickly. That's another thing. I just experimented with going from keto. I enjoyed it. I thought, I mean, that's one of the greatest tastes in the world. You fry an egg in lard,
or in beef dripping.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
delicious as well.
Exactly. Beef dripping, or extra virgin olive oil, or a mixture of extra virgin olive oil and butter. And I can't get all the time free range stuff. So I just get what I can and make what I can with it. But it's so lovely. And I say, when other people say, don't you get fed up with eggs? And I say, well, no,
No.
tasting things in
I'm
the
just
world.
the same. Yes, I
The
agree.
same with, because I buy pig's feet, which hardly anybody else wants to buy. I buy pig's feet, pig trotters.
Yes.
And my God, the taste, it's fantastic. It's like all these old cuts of meat on the bone.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up eating tripe. Tripe was very, very popular in our family growing up. And I used to love that. And so over in Eastern Europe, a very popular stew for hundreds of years is tripe and pig's trotters. And that has been very popular.
Yeah. All this stuff. And if you go back, in fact, my local butcher, who's fourth generation, where I am, he remembers very, very easily when they would make a stew, and he used to sell tripe, so they know how to cook tripe. But he used to say, always put the pig's feet in the stew. Same, all the old cuts, neck and tail, and sometimes he puts pig's tails in there as well. And I got to the stage where I was in the slow cooker, keeping it going, and then in the end the bones dissolve, and I would eat the bone. And if you want a strong bone, eat bone. So that's why people used to make bone broth. That's you want strong skin, eat skin. For a long, long time, I've been biting the ends off chicken bones and sucking out the marrow. So all of this stuff, it's a question of connecting with our ancient past, but finding a fusion of what we want from now.
Exactly.
there are some good things about
Yeah.
life
Yes.
now. And modern medicine, maybe in some respects, has become very good, obviously, at acute illness. And if someone has a heart attack, they can put a stent in and then you can be out straight away.
Yeah.
But then the idea of going on to statins after that, that's not so
Oh,
good.
no,
And I know
that's not a
people
good
who've said,
idea. No.
no. So for whatever reason, they've not looked after themselves and, oh, well, heart attack, that's their warning. They wake up and then they...
I think it's learning to live in the modern world, but
Yeah.
having some practices that our ancestors would have had. Because I think people who overly embrace the modern world, I'm not sure that it is particularly good for us, because simply our bodies are not used to living, you know, our cells are used to something else, really, aren't they? So it's learning a balance between the two. And I think everybody is different. Some people can maybe take more living in the modern world and less ancestral, and other people it would be the opposite way. And it's learning what is right for each person, as it is with our diets as well. You know, some people get on very well with carnivore, some people need a few more plants in there. So it's really depending on, and it's seeing ourselves as individuals on every possible level and finding what works for us.
Yes, very well said. Because everybody is different.
Yes.
And the more we know about our ancestral DNA, as it were, you know, what are we made of? And the more we can experiment safely with things, try things here and there.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. It's been so wonderful speaking to you. Would you let people know where they can find you, where they can find these resources that you've talked about? I know you've got a website and you've got other places. You've got your Substack, haven't you? So would you just let people know how they can find you?
The best way that I can say to get hold of me is through my name, which is Alan Chapman, and then .com. That's easy enough to remember.
Okay. Yes.
AlanChapman.com.
Yes.
And then the website livewildlivefree.org.
Okay.
So livewildlivefree.org.
Yes.
And Alan Chapman.
AlanChapman.com.
And it's ALANCHAP.
When I do the blurb for the video, I'll make sure that they're all listed there so that people can easily find you. Because I'm sure we've talked about so much. There is so many threads here that people can pick up on, and I'll list all the books that you've mentioned as well,
all right,
which I think people will find fascinating. So, Alan, thank you so much. I've just so enjoyed this talk. I think it's been
lovely. Me too.
fascinating,
Thank you for having me on
absolutely
so much,
fascinating. Deborah. And so take care. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye, Deborah. Thank you. Bye.